My life was a carefully constructed routine of grueling shifts at the Oak Haven Regional Clinic and quiet nights with my daughter. Everything was predictable, manageable, until he was carried in. Kian was a contradiction of controlled power and raw injury. His sharp, intelligent gray eyes tracked my every move as I assessed wounds that should have killed him. A jagged scar cut through his left eyebrow, hinting at old battles, but the fresh gashes on his torso were already beginning to close in a way that defied all medical logic. The humming of the refrigerator was the loudest sound in the world. It was a low, constant companion in the quiet of my small cottage, a sound I'd come to associate with peace, with the end of a 14-hour shift, and the certainty that my daughter Maya was sleeping safely in her room upstairs. The scent of pine and damp earth from the surrounding Glimmerwood Grove was a welcome replacement for the sterile, antiseptic smell of the Oak Haven Regional Clinic that clung to my scrubs. I sat in my worn armchair, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold in my hands, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. My mind kept replaying the last few hours of my shift. It wasn't the usual chaos of a rural clinic on a Friday night, the broken bones from farm accidents or the fevers that spiked in tired children. It was him, Kian Varick. The name itself felt heavy, ancient. I couldn't shake the image of his gray eyes, sharp and assessing, as I'd cleaned wounds that were already knitting themselves back together. Flesh that should have been shredded, muscle that should have been torn beyond simple repair, was closing up right before my eyes. It wasn't just fast healing. It was impossible. It defied every bit of medical training I'd ever had. A heavy thud against my front door jolted me from my thoughts, sloshing tea over my hand. My heart leaped into my throat. We were isolated out here in Glimmerwood Grove. We didn't get visitors, especially not this late. Another thud, this one weaker, was followed by a low, pained whine that vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't human. My training kicked in, pushing past the initial spike of fear. An injured animal, a deer, maybe, hit by a car on the winding road. Cautiously, I flicked on the porch light and peered through the small window in the door. My breath hitched. Sprawled on my welcome mat was a wolf, but it was bigger than any wolf I had ever seen, bigger than anything that should exist in these woods. Its fur was the color of midnight, matted with blood and mud, and its massive body was heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. A deep gash ran along its flank, horrifyingly similar to one of the wounds I had just stitched on Kian Varick. My mind screamed at me to lock the door, call animal control, and hide. This was a predator, a monster from a fairy tale lying on my doorstep. But then its head lifted, just an inch, and its eyes met mine. They were a startling, intelligent gray, the same gray eyes that had watched me in the clinic. In them, I saw not mindless savagery, but a desperate, world-weary plea. The nurse in me, the part that couldn't stand to see any living thing in pain, won out over the terrified mother. "Okay," I whispered to myself, my hand trembling as I turned the deadbolt. "Okay, you idiot. You're doing this." I dragged a heavy quilt from the back of the sofa, and with a strength born of adrenaline, managed to pull the enormous creature inside, its weight a dead anchor against the wooden floor. It didn't fight me, only let out another soft whine as I moved it. I shut and locked the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The cottage suddenly felt claustrophobically small with this beast inside. The air was thick with the scent of wet fur, blood, and something else, something wild and electric, like the air before a lightning strike. I knelt beside it, my fingers gently probing the edges of the wound on its side. It was deep, nasty, but as I worked, cleaning it with supplies from my emergency kit, I noticed the same impossible phenomenon. The edges of the torn flesh seemed to be visibly pulling together, the bleeding slowing to a sluggish ooze far faster than it should have. "What are you?" I murmured, more to myself than to the animal. Its gray eyes were closed now, its breathing evening out. The sheer exhaustion radiating from it was palpable. Convinced it was stable and likely to sleep for hours, I stood up, my back aching from the effort, and went to wash the blood from my hands. I was standing at the sink, staring at my own pale, frightened face in the reflection of the dark window, when the sound started. It was a low crack, like a branch snapping under heavy snow, then another, louder this time. I spun around. The wolf was convulsing. Its massive form writhed on the quilt, a choked, guttural sound tearing from its throat. I watched in abject horror as its bones began to shift, to buckle, and elongate under its skin. The sound was sickening, a wet, grinding series of snaps and pops. Its snout seemed to retract, the fur receding into skin that stretched and paled, limbs twisted, reforming into human arms and legs. It was a grotesque, Agonizing metamorphosis, and I was frozen, unable to scream, unable to look away. In less than a minute, the monstrous wolf was gone. In its place, lying naked and bleeding on my floor, was Kian Varric. The gash on his side was raw and open, mirroring the one the wolf had borne. He pushed himself up onto one elbow, his chest heaving, sweat and blood plastering his black hair to his forehead. He looked at me, and his gray eyes held the same pain and desperation I had seen in the wolf's. "I'm sorry," he rasped, his voice raw. "I didn't know where else to go. They were tracking me." My mind refused to process it. I took a step back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a sob of sheer terror and disbelief. It was you?" The words were a strangled whisper. "Yes." He tried to sit up further and grimaced. "What you saw at the clinic," his hand going to his side. "What you see now. My name is Kian. I'm a shifter." "A shifter?" The word sounded like something out of a cheap novel. My legs felt weak, and I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. This wasn't real. It was a stress-induced hallucination. "There are others," he said, his voice gaining a hard, urgent edge. "Another pack. They're the ones who did this. They're hunting me, and by treating me, by bringing me into your home. Claire, you've marked this place with my scent." Yourself. Before I could even begin to form a response, a low growl echoed from outside, just beyond the thin wooden walls of my cottage. It wasn't the sound of a single animal. It was a chorus, deep and menacing. Kian's head snapped toward the door, his entire body tensing. The exhaustion fell away from him, replaced by a primal, terrifying alertness. "They're here," he said, his voice a low snarl. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying for a moment before finding his balance. He stood there, a towering naked figure of scarred muscle, completely unconcerned with his own state, his focus entirely on the threat outside. "Get your daughter, now." The command galvanized me. "Maya." My blood ran cold. The growls outside were getting louder. Closer. I could hear the heavy padding of massive paws circling the cottage, the scrape of claws on the wooden porch steps. I didn't question him. I didn't have time for disbelief anymore. I scrambled up the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps, and burst into Maya's room. She was still asleep, a small lump under her unicorn-patterned duvet, her breathing soft and even. A wave of fierce, desperate love washed over me. I would not let anything happen to her. I scooped her up into my arms. She stirred, murmuring sleepily, and buried her face in my shoulder. "Mommy, what's happening?" "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We're just going downstairs." To play a game. The sound of splintering wood ripped through the night as a window in the living room shattered. A guttural snarl followed, filled with a predatory hunger that made my stomach clench. I ran back down the stairs, clutching Maya so tightly, she whimpered. Kian was standing between us and the broken window, his body a formidable barrier. In the moonlight streaming in, I could see two hulking shapes, larger than the wolf he had been, their eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. "Stay behind me," Kian ordered, his voice dropping into a register that was barely human. He didn't even look at me. His entire being was focused on the intruders. "They'll kill us," I breathed, backing toward the kitchen, toward the back door. "They will not touch you," he snarled. One of the beasts, a brute with mangy black fur, launched itself through the shattered window frame, landing with a heavy thud that shook the floor. It ignored Kian, its glowing eyes locking onto me and the small child in my arms. It saw prey. It saw weakness. It took a step forward, a deep, rumbling growl building in its chest. Kian moved faster than I thought possible. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a force of nature. He met the creature head-on, his fist connecting with its jaw with a sickening crunch. The wolf-like beast was thrown sideways, crashing into my bookshelf and sending paperbacks flying. But it was up in an instant, shaking its massive head, blood dripping from its mouth. The second one was now climbing through the window. We were trapped. My sanctuary, my tiny safe home, had become a cage with monsters. "The back door!" Kian yelled, grappling with the first wolf, his muscles straining as he held its snapping jaws away from his throat. "There's a path through the woods. My truck is on the old logging road. Go." I didn't hesitate. Cradling Maya's head against my chest to shield her from the sight, I fumbled with the lock on the back door and plunged out into the cold autumn night. The air was frigid, and the mist of Glimmerwood Grove swirled around my bare feet. Behind me, I heard a roar of pure rage from Kian, followed by the sound of something heavy splintering my dining table. "Run, Claire!" his voice boomed, carrying an unnatural authority that compelled me to obey. I ran blindly through the tangled undergrowth, branches whipping at my face and arms, Maya's small body a precious, terrifying weight. The sounds of the fight faded, replaced by the pounding of my own heart and the rasp of my breath in the cold air. The woods I had always found peaceful were now filled with menacing shadows and unseen terrors. Every snap of a twig sounded like pursuit. Minutes later, which felt like hours, the driver's side door was torn open. Kian fell into the seat, his body covered in fresh wounds. Deep claw marks raked across his chest and arms, bleeding freely, but his gray eyes were blazing with victory and adrenaline. He started the engine with a roar that matched the ferocity I'd just witnessed. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice strained as he glanced back at me and Maya. I could only nod, unable to speak past the lump of terror in my throat. Maya was crying softly now, her small body trembling against mine. Kian put the truck in gear and tore down the logging road, the powerful vehicle making short work of the rough terrain. "They won't follow us now, not for a while." "Where are we going?" I finally managed to ask, my voice thin and reedy. "Somewhere safe," he said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "A sanctuary. My home. It's called Silverwood Crest." The rest of the drive was a blur of dark country roads and silent forests. Kian explained things in clipped, terse sentences. He was the alpha of his pack. The attackers were from a rival pack, the Blackwood Marauders, who sought to take his territory. The war had been brewing for generations. By healing him at the clinic and then bringing him into my home, my scent was now intertwined with his, making me and Maya a target, a weakness they would exploit to get to him. "You've dragged us into your war," I said, the accusation laced with a fear so profound it was almost physical. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, the primal warrior was gone, replaced by a man carrying an immense weight. "I know," he said, his voice heavy with a solemnity that surprised me. "And I will spend every moment I have left making sure you both survive it. I swear it." As dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and bruised purple, he turned off the main highway onto a road that wasn't on any map. We drove through a dense valley, the mist so thick it was like moving through clouds. Then, the trees parted, and I saw it. Perched on a rise dominating the landscape was Silverwood Crest. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress, a sprawling Gothic-style manor made of dark, imposing stone, with towers and turrets that clawed at the morning sky. It looked ancient, formidable, and utterly out of place in the modern world. Massive, wrought-iron gates stood closed before us, flanked by stone walls that disappeared into the woods. Kian slowed the truck to a stop before the gates. He didn't get out or press a button. He simply waited. A moment later, the impossibly heavy gates swung inward with a low groan, opening a path to the life I never knew existed, and a destiny I never asked for. I looked from the intimidating stone fortress back to my daughter, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep in my arms. My small, predictable world had been shattered. My cottage in the woods, my quiet life, it was all gone, tainted by a violence I couldn't comprehend. Kian had saved us, but he had also damned us. He had brought us to this place, this Silverwood Crest, promising safety. But as I stared at the dark, unblinking windows of the manor, I felt a chilling certainty that while I may have escaped the hunting wolves in the woods, I had just walked into the heart of the den. The real danger, I suspected, was just beginning. The truck rumbled over a gravel drive that crunched like bones under the heavy tires. As we drew closer, the sheer scale of Silverwood Crest became overwhelming. It wasn't just a house, it was a declaration carved in stone, a monument to centuries of dominance. Moonlight caught on the sharp angles of the roof and glinted off dozens of dark leaded glass windows that watched our approach like the eyes of some colossal sleeping beast. Gargoyles I hadn't noticed from a distance perched on the parapets, their stone faces twisted into silent snarls, warding off evils I was only just beginning to understand. "Wait here," Kian said. It wasn't a request. His voice had changed since we'd passed through the gates, shedding some of its raw urgency and taking on a deeper, more resonant tone of command. He swung himself out of the truck, moving with a stiff grace that told me his wounds, though already healing, were still causing him immense pain. The great oak door swung open before he reached it, spilling warm, golden light onto the gravel. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, nearly as tall as Kian, but leaner, with silver threaded through his dark hair. As Kian stepped into the light, the man's posture, initially rigid and formal, sagged with visible relief. "Alpha," the man said, his voice a low baritone. "We felt the breach at the boundary line. We feared—" "I'm alive, Elias." Kian cut him off, his tone clipped. The Blackwoods were waiting, 3 of them. The man, Elias, looked past Kian, his eyes landing on the truck, on me and the sleeping child in my arms. His face, which had been etched with concern, hardened into a mask of cold suspicion. His gaze was sharp, analytical, missing nothing. He was cataloging me. My torn and dirty scrubs, my bare, mud-stained feet, my terrified expression. "You brought a human here?" Elias's voice was laced with disbelief and a sharp edge of disapproval. "And a child? She is under my protection," Kian stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. He turned and walked back to my door, pulling it open. The authority rolling off him was a palpable force, silencing any further protest from Elias. "Come, Claire. You're safe now." Safe, the word felt like a lie. I was in a monster's castle, surrounded by his kind, a pawn in a war I didn't know existed an hour ago. But the alternative, being out there in the woods with the red-eyed creatures that had invaded my home, was unthinkable. My legs felt like lead as I slid out of the truck, careful not to wake Maya. I clutched her to my chest, her small body my only anchor in this swirling nightmare. As I stepped onto the drive, others began to emerge from the shadows of the manor, men and women, all of them possessing the same unnerving stillness and intense, watchful eyes as Kian. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like people, strong, vital, and radiating a quiet power that was deeply intimidating. They formed a silent semicircle, their gazes fixed on me, a mixture of curiosity, hostility, and suspicion in their expressions. I felt like a mouse brought into a den of lions, and my every instinct screamed at me to run. Kian placed a hand on the small of my back, a brief, warm pressure that was both a comfort and a claim. "They will not harm you," he murmured, his voice low enough for only me to hear. He led me past the silent sentinels, through the massive doorway, and into the great hall of Silverwood Crest. I had expected something cold and austere, like a museum. Instead, I was met with a surprising warmth. A fire roared in a stone hearth so large I could have stood inside it. The hall was cavernous, with a ceiling lost in shadows far above, but it felt lived in. Thick rugs were scattered over a polished stone floor. Worn leather armchairs were grouped around the fireplace, and the air smelled of wood smoke, old books, and something else. A faint, musky scent that I now associated with Kian, with his other form. "Elias," Kian said, turning to the silver-haired man who had followed us inside. "Have a room prepared for our guests, the East Wing, and send for Maeve. I want her to look at my injuries and bring food for them." He nodded toward
Elias
me and
inclined
inclined his head, his expression still unreadable. "At once, Alpha." He strode away, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The other pack members lingered in the doorway, their whispers a low hum. I could feel their eyes on me, a physical weight of scrutiny. Kian turned to face them, and though he didn't raise his voice, his next words cut through the hall with absolute authority. "This is Claire Calloway and her daughter, Maya. They are guests of this pack, and are to be treated with all the respect that entails. Anyone who makes them feel unwelcome will answer to me directly. Is that understood?" A chorus of murmured assents answered him. The hostility in the air didn't vanish, but it receded, banked like embers under his command. He was their king, and his word was law. It was terrifying, and in a strange way, reassuring. For now, his protection was absolute. A woman with fiery red hair braided down her back and kind, clever eyes approached us. She was older than me, with laugh lines around her eyes that softened a face that was otherwise sharp and intelligent. "I am Maeve," she said, her voice warm and steady. She gave Kian a look that was both deferential and chiding. "You're a reckless fool, Kian Varric. Let's see the damage." Her gaze then shifted to me, and her expression softened with genuine compassion. "And you, poor dear. You look like you've been through a war." She gently touched Maya's hair, her fingers surprisingly gentle, Let's get you both settled. Elias is showing your room." Elias reappeared and led us up a wide, curving staircase, its wooden steps worn smooth by generations of use. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women, all of whom shared Kian's piercing gray eyes. It was a gallery of alphas, a lineage of power stretching back through time. We walked down a long, quiet corridor, the only sound the soft padding of our feet on a thick runner carpet. He stopped before a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. "This will be yours," he said, his tone formal. "Anything you require. You need only ask." He gave me one last, lingering look of distrust before turning and walking away. The room was larger than the entire ground floor of my cottage. A 4-poster bed with dark green hangings dominated one wall, and a smaller daybed was tucked into an alcove. A fire was already crackling in the fireplace, casting a warm, dancing light across the room. It was luxurious, a gilded cage. I gently laid Maya on the daybed. She stirred, her brow furrowed in her sleep, but didn't wake. I pulled a thick wool blanket over her, my hands trembling. Here, in the quiet of this room, the dam of adrenaline that had been holding me together began to crack. I sank into a chair by the fire, wrapping my arms around myself. My home was a wreck, possibly tainted forever. My life, the simple, predictable, exhausting life I had fought so hard to build for my daughter, had been obliterated in a single night. I was the prisoner of a man who turned into a wolf, the unwilling guest of a pack of supernatural creatures, and the target of another. Tears of fear, exhaustion, and rage began to slide silently down my cheeks. A soft knock came at the door. I wiped my face hastily and called out a weak, "Come in." Maeve entered, carrying a tray laden with a steaming bowl of stew, fresh bread, and a pitcher of water. She was followed by Kian, who had shed his tattered clothes and was now wearing a simple gray shirt and dark pants. The fresh clothes only served to highlight the angry red claw marks that raked across his chest and arms, and a new cut that sliced through his left eyebrow, mirroring an older, faded scar. Maeve had obviously tended to him, but the wounds were still raw, and yet I could see, even now, the edges were already beginning to knit together. "You need to eat," Maeve said kindly, setting the tray on a small table near my chair. Her eyes were full of a deep, knowing sympathy that made me want to break down completely. "The little one is unharmed? She slept through it all," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Thank God." "He is good at protecting what is his," Maeve said, glancing at Kian with a complicated expression, before turning back to me. "Rest. No one will disturb you here." With another kind smile, she left, closing the door softly behind her. An awkward silence filled the room, thick with unspoken questions and the crackling of the fire. Kian didn't move from his spot near the door, his large frame seeming to shrink the already spacious room. He just watched me, his gray eyes shadowed with a weariness that seemed bone-deep. "I'm sorry, Claire," he said finally, the words sounding rough as if they were unfamiliar to him. "I never intended for you or your daughter to be drawn into this. When I went to your cottage, I was desperate. My own wounds were slowing me down, and their scent was all over me. I thought I could rest long enough to heal and be gone before they tracked me." "You thought wrong," I said, the words sharper than I intended. The fear was beginning to curdle into anger. "They tried to kill us. They came into my home to kill us. Because of you." He flinched, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. "Yes, because of me. When you treated me at the clinic, my scent marked you. When you brought me over your threshold, it bonded this place to me, to my pack, to the Blackwoods. Your home became an extension of my territory, and you became a weakness to be exploited." "A weakness," I repeated numbly. "My daughter and I are a weakness." He took a step forward, his expression intense. "In their eyes, not in mine. In my eyes, you are the woman who showed compassion to a dying animal on her doorstep, who faced down a monster with nothing but a first aid kit and courage. I have not seen such strength in a long time." His words sent a strange warmth through me, an unwelcome flicker of connection that I immediately tried to extinguish. He was the reason my daughter was in danger. I couldn't forget that. I wouldn't. "What happens now?" I asked, forcing my voice to be cold, clinical. "Do we just stay here? Hide in this fortress? Until when? Until they break down the doors?" "They will not break down these doors," he said with absolute certainty. "The wards on this valley are ancient. Silverwood Crest has never fallen. You are safer here than anywhere else on Earth." "I wasn't looking for the safest place on Earth," I shot back, my voice rising. I stood up, unable to stay still. I was happy in my tiny, unsafe cottage. I had a life, a normal life. Maya had a normal life. That life is over, he said, his voice quiet but brutal in its finality. I am sorry for that, more than you can ever know, but there is no going back. The moment the Blackwoods identified you as a way to get to me, they would never have stopped hunting you. Even if I had left you there, they would have come for you eventually. Bringing you here was the only way to keep you alive. I paced in front of the fire, my mind racing. He was right. I knew he was right. The predatory hunger in those red eyes hadn't been directed at him. It had been for me and Maya. They had seen easy prey. My old life was gone, burned away in the space of a few terrifying hours. Why? I asked, stopping to face him. Why are they so intent on hunting you? What is this war about? He was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant, as if looking back through generations of conflict. Territory, power, an old blood feud that has festered for centuries. Their alpha, Marcus Blackwood, believes our pack is weak, because I have not yet secured my bloodline. He sees an opportunity to shatter us and claim our lands. Secured your bloodline? I asked, confused. I have not taken a mate, he clarified, his gaze dropping to the floor. For the first time, he looked almost vulnerable. An alpha's strength is tied to his pack, and a pack is strongest when the alpha has his Luna, his mate, by his side. It creates a balance. Marcus uses my lack of one as a sign of weakness, a prophecy of our pack's downfall. He walked over to a heavy, carved wooden bookshelf that stood against one wall. He ran his fingers over the spines of the ancient, leather-bound volumes before pulling one out. It was thicker than the others, bound not in leather, but in something that shimmered in the firelight, like hammered silver. Intricate, swirling patterns were embossed on the cover. This is the Argent Codex, he said, his voice filled with reverence. It contains the history of our people, our laws, and our prophecies. He carried the heavy book over to the table and laid it open. The pages were thick parchment, covered in an elegant, archaic script, and illuminated with intricate silver-leaf drawings of wolves and moons and constellations. Our seers have foretold many things that have come to pass, he continued, his finger tracing a line of text. But there is one prophecy that has been a puzzle for generations. It speaks of a time of great strife, when a new alpha will rise to face a shadow that threatens to consume all packs. It says his strength will not be enough, that the war can only be won when he finds his mate, a healer from the human world, who will bridge the two and bring an age of peace. A woman with the spirit of a wolf and the heart of a human, who can mend what is torn, both in flesh and in spirit. He looked up from the book, and his gray eyes locked onto mine. The intensity in them was like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I didn't understand it, he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. For years I searched. I never felt the mate bond my ancestors spoke of. I thought the prophecy was a myth, and then I was bleeding out in a human clinic, and a nurse with tired, kind eyes touched me, and my wolf, my very soul, settled for the first time in my life. I saw flesh that should have been mangled knitting itself together under your hands faster than even my own healing could manage. I felt a calm I have never known. My mind recoiled from the implication, from the sheer, terrifying impossibility of it all. No, I whispered, shaking my head. That's not. I'm a nurse. I clean wounds. I stitch people up. I'm not part of some magic prophecy, aren't you? He challenged softly, his gaze unwavering. You live on the edge of Glimmerwood Grove, a place humans have avoided for centuries because of the energy they feel there. You took a monster into your home without hesitation. You are a healer, Claire, more than you know. He tapped the ancient page. The prophecy says the healer will be the Alpha's anchor in the storm, that she will be his salvation, and he will be her shield. He took a step closer, and the space between us crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the undeniable pull I'd felt since I first laid eyes on him. I brought you here to protect you, Claire. That is the truth. But I believe there is another reason fate brought us together. I believe you are her, the healer from the prophecy, my mate. The words hung in the air between us, monstrous and beautiful, and utterly world-shattering. He wasn't just offering me a prison as a sanctuary. He was offering me a crown, a destiny, a cage made of prophecy and myth. I looked from his deadly, serious face to the ancient, silver-bound book, then to my daughter sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the fact that our lives had been irrevocably and terrifyingly intertwined with a world of monsters and magic. My choice was no longer just about survival. It was about what I was willing to become to ensure it. Mate. The word echoed in the sudden, crushing silence of the room, a single syllable that held the weight of a life I never asked for. It was absurd. It was the stuff of fever dreams and gothic novels, not the reality of a single mom from Whispering Hollows, whose biggest weekly drama was usually a missed car payment. I stared at him, at the raw conviction in his gray eyes, and a hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. I choked it back, but it came out as a ragged, strangled sound. Mate, I repeated, my voice shaking. You've got to be kidding me. I'm a nurse, Kian. A human nurse. I patch up drunks on a Saturday night and give flu shots to screaming toddlers. I don't bridge worlds or fulfill ancient prophecies. You're hurt. You're exhausted. You're seeing things that aren't there. My senses have never been clearer, he said, his voice low and steady, a rock against the tide of my panic. He didn't look offended, just patient, like a man trying to explain the color of the sky to someone who has been blind from birth. I have spent my entire adult life feeling untethered, a leader without his other half. The Alpha's power is immense, but it requires an anchor. Without one, it can turn inward, become a destructive force. The moment you touched me, I felt that anchor find its purchase. I shook my head, backing away until my shoulders hit the cool stone of the fireplace mantel. It was adrenaline, or shock, or static electricity, anything but that. I gestured wildly at the silver-bound book. At him, at the whole impossible situation. My daughter is sleeping right over there. Her world was toy dinosaurs and scraped knees this morning. Now she's sleeping in a monster's castle because her mother was foolish enough to help a wounded animal. That's the story here. That's the only story I can accept. I am not a monster, Claire. His voice was soft, but a flicker of hurt, of primal indignation, crossed his features. And this is not a castle. It is a home, my pack's home. Your pack tried to eat us, I shot back, the memory of those glowing red eyes and snarling teeth sending a fresh wave of terror through me. That was not my pack, he growled, the sound a low vibration that seemed to shake the very floorboards. That was Marcus Blackwood's doing. Scavengers and thugs who prey on the weak because they lack true strength. They are a blight, a corruption of what we are. They are the reason you are here, because I will not let them have you. The possessiveness in his voice was terrifying, yet a traitorous part of me, the part that had been alone and fighting for so long, felt a strange sense of relief. He spoke of protection as if it were an immutable law of physics. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, feeling the flimsy fabric of my scrubs, a pathetic remnant of a life that felt a million miles away. I need some air, I mumbled, feeling the walls of the luxurious room close in. I can't breathe, he nodded, his expression softening with a flicker of understanding. The east balcony is through that door. The air is clear tonight. No one will bother you. He paused. I will have guards posted in the hall, for your peace of mind. For my peace of mind, or to make sure his prophesied mate didn't make a run for it? I didn't ask. I just stumbled towards the door he indicated, a heavy oak panel that led to a stone balcony. The moment I stepped outside, the crisp autumn air hit my face, cold and sharp, and blessedly real. It smelled of pine and damp earth, the scent of the deep, unending forest that surrounded this valley. The moon was high and bright, illuminating a breathtaking vista. Silverwood Crest was perched on the side of a mountain, overlooking a valley shrouded in a low-lying mist that swirled like a silver sea. It was beautiful, hauntingly so, a secret world hidden from human eyes, and I was its prisoner. I leaned on the cold stone balustrade, my knuckles white, a healer, a mate, an anchor. The words were meaningless, insane, and yet I thought of the gash on his side at the clinic. It should have been a deep, weeping wound requiring dozens of stitches, possibly surgery, but it had already begun to close, the flesh knitting together under my fingers in a way that defied every medical principle I had ever learned. I hadn't healed him. My touch had just accelerated what his body was already doing. And when the wolf collapsed on my porch, its breathing shallow, its fur matted with blood, I had felt a strange calm settle over me as I worked, a certainty that I knew what to do. I had attributed it to years of emergency room training, but was it something more? The thought was a dangerous one, a tiny crack in the wall of my skepticism. I pushed it away. Coincidence, stress, a trick of the light. There had to be a rational explanation, because if there wasn't, then my world had fractured in a way I could never repair. I stayed out there for what felt like hours, until the cold seeped into my bones. When I finally went back inside, Kian was gone. The tray of food was still there, the stew now cold. The Argent Codex lay closed on the table. Only the fire remained, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I checked on Maya, who was still sound asleep, her face peaceful. Seeing her, so small and innocent in this enormous, strange bed, solidified my resolve. Prophecy or not, my only duty was to her. I had to find a way out of this. The next morning, I woke to a soft light filtering through the thick leaded glass windows. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was at home, that the night had been a nightmare. Then I saw the stone walls, the high beamed ceiling, and the crushing reality came back. Maya was still asleep. I slid out of the massive bed, my bare feet sinking into a thick, soft rug. Someone had left a set of clean clothes on a chair, simple woolen pants, a soft cotton shirt, and thick socks. They were practical and warm, and though I hated the idea of accepting anything from them, my scrubs were a tattered, muddy mess. After I dressed, I found a pitcher of fresh water and a basin. As I washed my face, I met my own eyes in the small, silver-framed mirror above the washstand. I looked haunted. The tired lines around my eyes seemed deeper, my face pale with shock. This was not the face of a prophesied savior. It was the face of a terrified mother. A gentle knock sounded at the door. I froze, my heart hammering. Yes? The door opened and Maeve entered, carrying another tray, this one with porridge, fruit, and steaming mugs of what smelled like herbal tea. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were searching, assessing my state. "Good morning," she said gently. "I thought you and the little one might be hungry. Kian said you didn't eat last night." "I wasn't," I said, my voice clipped. Maeve didn't take offense. She set the tray down. "It's a lot to take in. The fear can steal your appetite." She looked over at Maya. "She's a beautiful child. Looks just like you. Thank you." The words were automatic, polite. I didn't want to be charmed. I didn't want to find common ground. Kian is... He intense. Carries the weight of generations on his shoulders. As if sensing my internal battle. He has never known a world without this war with the Blackwoods. It has made him hard, but not cruel. He brought this war to my doorstep, I countered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He put my daughter in danger. He saved your daughter, she corrected, her tone still gentle but firm. I know it doesn't feel that way. You've lost your home, your life as you knew it. But what you gained is the protection of an alpha, who would let this entire valley burn before allowing anyone to harm you. You may not believe in the prophecy, Claire, but he does. And because he does, every single member of this pack is now bound by oath to protect you and your child with their lives. Her words hung in the air. I wanted to reject them, to tell her I didn't want her pack's protection, but the image of those red eyes in the dark, the splintering of my front door, was too vivid. Before I could respond, Maya stirred, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, where are we?" Her voice was small and sleepy. She looked around the grand room, her eyes wide with a child's wonder, not fear. "Is this a castle?" I rushed to her side, smoothing her tangled hair. "It's a big house, sweetie. We're staying here for a little while. Are you hungry?" Maya's eyes landed on Maeve, and then on the tray. She nodded enthusiastically. As I helped her into a chair and gave her a bowl of porridge, Maeve watched us, a soft, almost sad smile on her face. "I was a healer too," she said quietly, "before my hands grew too stiff. I used herbs and poultices, our ways. Your gift is different." Kian said it was like watching life itself knit him back together. I ignored her, focusing on Maya, but I couldn't block it all out. A gift. She called it a gift. I called it a curse. Over the next few days, I settled into a strange, suspended reality. I didn't leave our rooms much at first. Food was brought to us, and I spent the hours reading to Maya from a small collection of children's books someone had left for us, or just holding her, reassuring myself that she was safe. But Maya was a child, and she grew restless. She wanted to explore the castle. Hesitantly, I agreed. I couldn't keep her locked in a room forever. Our first foray into the manor was nerve-wracking. We walked down the long, portrait-lined corridors, my hand gripping Maya's so tightly she complained. The people we passed, the pack members, would stop and stare. Their faces were a mixture of expressions I couldn't quite decipher. Curiosity, awe, and in some, a clear, cold hostility. I saw Elias, the silver-haired man from the first night, watching us from a distance. His disapproval was a palpable force. I was the human, the outsider, the weakness, but not everyone was hostile. An older woman with a kind, wrinkled face, offered Maya a freshly baked cookie as we passed the kitchens. A young man who looked to be barely out of his teens gave us a shy, respectful nod. They were a people, a community, and I was the foreign object dropped into their midst. Kian gave me space, for which I was grateful. I saw him mostly from a distance, a commanding figure in the great hall, conferring with his pack leaders, or walking the battlements of the manor, his face grim and watchful. He was every inch the alpha king he claimed to be, but sometimes, late at night, I would see him standing by the massive fireplace, staring into the flames, and the loneliness radiating from him was so profound it was like a physical ache. In those moments, I saw the man, not the alpha, and the strange pull I felt towards him would return, unwelcome and undeniable. One afternoon I found a library. It was a magnificent 2-story room filled with thousands of books, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather. A spiral staircase led to an upper gallery, and stained glass windows threw colored light across the dusty shelves. Maya was immediately enchanted. While she looked at a large picture book of maps, I found myself drawn to a section on folklore and history. I pulled out a heavy tome, its pages brittle with age. It was a history of the region, written by a human centuries ago. I flipped through it, my breath catching when I found a chapter on the Whispering Valley. The author described a secluded valley, protected by strange mists and geography, said to be inhabited by a reclusive clan of people who were more wolf than man, fiercely territorial, and possessing unnatural strength and longevity. He wrote of their leader, the Varric, who was said to command the very beasts of the forest. It was dismissed as local superstition, of course, but I was living inside that superstition. Finding anything interesting? Kian's voice, quiet and close behind me, made me jump. I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. I hadn't heard him approach. Just history, I stammered. He came to stand beside me, his presence filling the space. He smelled of the outdoors, of pine and cold air. Our history and yours have been intertwined for longer than your books remember. We have mostly kept to ourselves. It was better that way. Until now, I said quietly. Until now, he agreed, his gaze falling on Maya, who was now tracing a line on a map with her finger, completely absorbed. She is not afraid here. She's a child. She thinks it's an adventure. I lowered my voice. She doesn't understand that the monsters are real. We are not the monsters you should fear, Claire. His expression hardened. Marcus Blackwood is. His pack is growing. He's been turning desperate humans, those with a darkness already in their hearts. They kill for sport. They are unstable. He believes that by destroying my pack, by destroying me, he will absorb our power, our territory. He has been testing our borders for months. Your arrival has made him bolder. He sees you as a weapon he can use against me. The clinical, detached part of my nurse's brain took over. How? What does he want? He wants to break me, Kian said, his voice a low growl. He knows about the prophecy. All packs do. If he can take you from me, he believes it will shatter my pack's morale and prove that I am not the alpha of the prophecy. He will kill you, but not before he makes me watch. A cold dread washed over me, so potent it made me feel sick. This wasn't just a territorial dispute. It was personal, psychotic. I looked at Maya, so blissfully unaware, and the choice I had been avoiding crystallized in my mind. There was no running. There was no hiding. The Blackwoods wouldn't just let us go. They would hunt us to the ends of the earth. My old life wasn't just over. It had been a flimsy illusion of safety that was now utterly shattered. What do you want from me? I whispered, my voice barely audible. You say I'm this healer, this mate. What does that even mean? He turned to face me fully, his gray eyes intense, searching. It means you are my equal, my other half. The prophecy speaks of a bridge. We are a people of instinct, of passion. You're a people of violence when necessary. You have a capacity for a different kind of strength, for compassion, for resilience, for a quiet perseverance that we sometimes lack. It is meant to be a balance, the alpha's fire tempered by the healer's calm, the heart of the pack. He took a careful step closer. I don't ask you to believe in a dusty old book, Claire. I ask you to believe in what you feel, this connection between us. You feel it too. I know you do. He was right. I hated that he was right. A low hum beneath the surface of my fear, a sense of recognition every time he was near, as if some dormant part of my soul was waking up. Even if I did, I said, my throat tight. What can I do? I'm a human. I can't fight them. Your strength isn't in fighting, he said, his gaze softening. It's in holding us together. It's in healing us. Maeve's hands are failing. We have other healers, but none with your potential. Your presence here, as my mate, would unify this pack in a way nothing else could. It would give them the hope they need to face what's coming. It would make us stronger than Marcus could ever imagine. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was electric, a jolt that went straight through me. I am asking you to choose, Claire. Stay. Stand with us. Stand with me. Let me protect you and Maya, not as a guest, not as a prisoner, his queen, as family, as my Luna. The word was both terrifying and seductive. He wasn't offering me a cage. He was offering me a throne, a purpose in this terrifying new world, a way to fight back, not with claws and teeth, but with the very thing I'd built my life on, healing. I looked at Maya, who had finally looked up from her book and was watching us with curious eyes. My daughter, my world. Kian was offering her a fortress, a pack of sworn protectors, a life free from the fear of being hunted. The price was my old life, my identity as a normal woman. But that woman was gone already, vanished in the smoke and terror of that night at the cottage. My decision wasn't really a decision at all. It was an inevitability. It was the only path forward that led to Maya's safety. I took a deep breath, the air in the ancient library thick with the weight of destiny. I met Kian's gaze, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I let him see the fear, but also the flicker of resolve that was finally taking root. Okay, I said, the single word feeling like the biggest one I'd ever spoken. Okay, Kian, we'll stay. A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine, breathtaking smile that transformed his harsh features and made him look younger, less burdened. The relief that washed over him was so powerful I could feel it. A wave of warmth that finally made me feel like I was home. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just a pawn in someone else's war. I had chosen a side. I had chosen to fight. If you love stories where destiny is sealed by a powerful love, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't miss the next epic chapter in the supernatural world, the best place for alpha and omega love stories. Come join our pack.